So if you're noticing a bit of a screwed up look on my face, that's just because I got done experiencing the 9th episode of Castle Rock, Henry Deaver. I don't want to say watching, I want to go with experiencing, because that's pretty much the best way to describe it. First off, if I am even right about half the things I think I got out of the episode, I really, really liked it, enjoyed it, and think it's setting things up really, really well for the season finale. I also have a couple things to say in regards to this episode and Twin Peaks: The Return, but I'll save those for the end. But this is an easy episode to review because there was a lot going on, but yet not much going on. What we were given was essentially the reality that we are talking about alternate dimensions and alternate possibilities. Just what they said the schisma was is what has been playing out. This episode, we are introduced to the kid, Bill Skarsgard. He is Henry Deaver, and we are introduced to his dimensions, Henry Deaver life, where we see him. He is doing medical research as a doctor to help with Alzheimer's patients. Ruth, his mom, has actually gone to live with Sheriff Pangborn. She's left Castle Rock. Reverend Deaver did not do well. He took his own life, and apparently, from what we hear in the episode, had spent some time spiraling into madness. So all of these things come into play. Henry, leaving his wife, who, you know, they're working to have a kid. I'm interested to see if that's going to come into play. He essentially goes back to Castle Rock to obviously take care of his father's things, and in a eerie similarity to how the series started, he finds a young man locked up in his father's basement, and lo and behold, it is the young version of Andre Holland's Henry Deaver. And yes, like I said, we are talking about alternate dimensions and alternate realities. We are talking about the schisma that's come into play, and what you may think happened is happening. And it's interesting because we see in Bill Skarsgard's universe a little tweakings. You know, the ones I had mentioned. We also see Molly. She's not in real estate. She's much more confident about herself, and she's actually chair of the town council. And it just seems like it's interesting, even though you get the sense of the vileness behind Castle Rock, there even seems be a bit more vibrancy to it than when we see Andre Holland's Henry Deaver universe. I'm going to try and keep this straight, but it's going to get confusing. I completely know that. What is interesting is that we see a lot of parallels. The fire at the hospital, the ability for young Henry Deaver to escape, Molly being able to connect with Henry Deaver, apparently it would seem, across alternate dimensions, which I thought was a really nice touch. And her faith and trust in getting him to the woods, the idea that young Henry Deaver needed to get to the woods and older Henry Deaver needed to help him, which was sad because, you know, we see Molly pass away in this universe after being shot by Zalewski, who apparently screws up in 2 universes. But this is where it gets even more tragic, in that I know I had my belief about guardian angels and devils and things like that, but it looks like this is going to be more tragic in the sense that it was a matter of him getting caught in young Henry Deaver's dimension and trying to find his way around and trying to figure out how to get back. And meanwhile, young Henry Deaver, it played out as we saw when they talked about how he returned from being lost. Now, with history repeating itself, you know, alternate dimension Henry Deaver now has to take the place, and of course that's where Warden Lacey comes in, and we see all of that with Warden Lacey calling him the devil, and we see how all that comes into play. The madness that had these men thinking the voice of God wasn't really the voice of God and delivered the devil, and the devil's trying to trick him. It is horrible and it is tragic. It is also makings of a great episode, and I really, really was impressed with. One thing I want to say that I thought was a particularly nice touch, and I think you'll have noticed it, there was a scene where Bill Skarsgård was in the car driving by and we saw some red balloons. You couldn't help but think of it. It just was coming into play. The other thing I liked about it too is that after we're watching this amazing episode and we feel like maybe we're kind of sort of getting a feel for this, there's a line where we're going to go with Henry Deaver. Bill Skarsgård says to Molly, "You believe me, don't you?" And even then we're like, oh, really? Now, is this going to be like the Ruth Deaver, Sissy Spacek episode where we have to question how much is real and how much was the result of her dementia? You know, are we now, is it the devil, as they say in the episode, is the devil giving us what we want, you know, for us to essentially buy into what he has to say? The other thing I want to talk about too is this idea of the schisma and alternate dimensions and parallel dimensions and things like that. It brought to mind Twin Peaks: The Return from Showtime, and I just want to make 2 comparisons as to why I think they've done a much better job here than what David Lynch did with Twin Peaks. First, it introduced the concept without beating us over the head with it. I didn't feel like I had to take 3 college courses to understand the concept and in the process get so pulled out of the storyline. They introduced it, I understood it so far, at least I hope. But again, keeping enough mystery that keeps me interested and keeps me wanting to tune in. The other aspect, too, is with Twin Peaks, I felt like I was watching it, even with what was going on with Cooper and what was going on with Laura. But with Castle Rock, especially this episode, I feel like I'm experiencing it. You know, that I'm feeling what they're going through. So while I may not be getting all the specific details and the science behind what's going on, there's a heartbreak in what you saw was a look in Henry Deaver's face when he found himself and knew at that moment, I'm not home anymore. You can even imagine what it must be like. And then to know that you're essentially going to be sitting in a cell for 27 years. It's just amazing episode all around. I'm very, very excited to see how they're going to be wrapping up this season.